Hi everyone, I just wanted to emphasize that I have zero construction or remodeling experience, and the methods I use in this upcoming video series are probably not the most efficient or best practice. A lot of this is going to be trial and error for me, so if you have any suggestions, please feel free to let me know. My body will appreciate it. Thank you. So getting into it here, the first thing I wanted to do as far as getting these cabinets out was to first remove all unnecessary weight to make the process a little bit easier. So I start by removing all of the drawers and getting the cabinet doors off just to lighten the load a bit. And I had actually removed the floor cabinet there in the bottom right hand corner. I had removed that one prior to actually start filming the process. I just wanted to get a feel for what I was kind of going to be dealing with here. and turns out it's not as easy as you would think, at least in this scenario. The cabinets were, while they were cheap quality, they were expertly anchored to these walls. I mean, it was unbelievable getting these things out. They were not only anchored from the top and bottom with 3-inch drywall screws, but they were also stapled together like 100,000 times with the staple gun, and it made it almost impossible to remove them as a whole. So you'll see here soon where I kind of realize this and just start tearing them apart piece by piece. That was the only way I was going to be getting them out of here. I discovered pretty quickly that gloves came in quite handy here, just with the amount of staples that these things had. I mean, they were sticking out everywhere like little spikes, and the heavy duty gloves that I had on saved my fingers quite a few times. You just got to be real careful when grabbing these shelves and just pieces of particle board as far as tearing them out, because there are staples sticking out absolutely everywhere. Another thing that didn't work really in my favor was the fact that these screws that were mounting the cabinets into the wall were pretty much either rounded out or rusted beyond getting any sort of grip with my power drill and getting them out. So it just made it more difficult. I had to pry most of them out piece by piece and breaking like the trim piece off to where it was still anchored to the wall, and then I had to break the trim piece off around the screws securing it to the wall. And then at that point, a lot of them I was able to kind of screw out without the extra weight kind of holding them in, and others I just kind of had to force out with a pair of pliers. I strongly recommend shutting the power off, not just the breaker that you believe the appliance is on, but the main breaker, just to be safe when handling anything electronic or with wires. I learned this the hard way when I was taking down the stove range, and I had the breaker off that went to the stove, but the range hood was on a separate circuit, which I was not aware of, and I found out very quickly the hard way when I was taking it down and went to disconnect the wiring, and it essentially blew up in my face, cutting off basically the power to the house. I had to go reset the breaker. But yeah, that could have ended very bad for me, so I would strongly recommend, if you're unsure like I was in the future, just shut off all the main power. I will be doing that from now on. So I moved the fridge out of my way so I can get to the cabinets up top, and of course, no surprise, it looks like it's never been cleaned behind before in its lifetime here. And I found a wonderful piece of bubble gum.
Why does it feel like I lost? Because we can't say those three words to each other is because they aren't true. Then why?
These particle board countertops were probably just as big of a pain to remove as the cabinets themselves. You would think they would just pry off from the top and come off relatively easy, but they are actually secured quite well. The trim piece on the top is not only glued to the wall behind it, but is anchored to the countertop with numerous staples, and then the countertop itself is stapled 100 times to the cabinetry, as well as anchored with, I think, 1-inch screws. So the countertops themselves were just as big of a pain to pop off as removing the cabinets themselves. Here I finally was able to get the dishwasher out. It was kind of tricky. I didn't have a wrench with me for some reason, so I had to run home and grab one. As far as disconnecting the lines, it was pretty simple, but the dishwasher was still full of some nasty water. So I tried to get as much out in that little bucket as I could, and then I took it out to the front door and just tilted it out to drain what I could out, and it's just going to sit in the living room for right now. And here's the sink, same thing, I just disconnected the lines. I've got the main water off to the house, so I didn't really have to worry about springing a leak or anything like that. Strongly recommend if working with any plumbing. If you're unsure, if you don't know if the shutoffs work correctly, just shut the main water off to the house just to be safe. You don't want to cause an unnecessary flood. So at this point, I'm wondering how the CDC hasn't quarantined this house in the past. It's kind of worse than I thought. I knew there was water damage, but the extent was pretty bad. Now that I've gotten pretty much all the cabinetry out and I've just got that bottom piece left covering the floor, I'm noticing just how bad it actually is. It's completely rotted. It's covered in mold. My foot can go right through to the crawl space. I do not know how people lived in this environment, but they were for years, and it's kind of quite comical to see how all of the flooring around the problem has been replaced, but the problem itself has never been fixed, and that's why the floor is rotted out so bad underneath the sink. So that's a little word of advice, I guess, is if you have a problem, just fix it and you won't continue to have these problems in the future. Lastly, here's a quick little spin of the overall result of the kitchen with everything out. Overall, not bad. I'm pretty pleased with most of the flooring, except for obviously around the sink area, but my next task is going to be getting all of that replaced, and I'm going to start tonight, I believe. So stay tuned for that next video, and thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you later.